Welcome to another lecture by MedicoMedics, Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, Chapter 10, Antimicrobial Agents. In this lecture, we will give you an overview over antimicrobial agents, how these work. We will talk about antibiotics, antiviral agents, antifungal, and antiparasitic. Furthermore, we will mention antimicrobial resistance, how to deal with this, and future developments in antimicrobials, and end with a summary. Now, introduction to antimicrobial agents. So these are substances that kill or inhibit the growth of microorganisms. And we have different types. So we have antibiotics, these target bacteria. Antivirals, these target viruses. Antifungals, targeting fungi, and antiparasitics, targeting parasites. Now, as we mentioned, antimicrobial agents are drugs designed to target and eliminate pathogens while minimizing harm to the host. They are classified, as we mentioned, based on the type of microorganism that they act against. So let's start with antibiotics. These target bacteria. So antibiotics are drugs that inhibit bacterial growth, and we call these bacteriostatic, or kill bacteria. We call these bactericidal, by targeting essential bacterial processes. So some mechanisms of action is, for example, inhibiting cell wall synthesis. And an example of a penicillin is the example is penicillins, also known as beta-lactams. And these include also, the group of beta-lactams also includes cephalosporins and carbapenems. So these inhibit cell wall synthesis. Then we have antibiotics that inhibit protein synthesis. For example, tetracyclines, macrolides, aminoglycosides. These all inhibit protein synthesis, which means they target somehow the ribosomes that are involved in synthesizing our proteins. If you remember from other lectures, we talked about subunits 50, subunits 30, etc. Then we have antibiotics that disrupt nucleic acid replication, like fluoroquinolones or rifampin. We also have antibiotics that alter membrane permeability, like polymyxins. Now, some clinically relevant information could be that overuse of antibiotics leads to antibiotic resistance. For example, MRSA, MRSA, or multidrug resistant tuberculosis, for example. And some antibiotics are broad spectrum, so they target many different bacteria, while others are narrow spectrum, so they target specific bacteria. Then we have antivirals. Now, since viruses rely on host cells to replicate, antivirals interfere with viral replication without harming the host cell. So some mechanisms of action include inhibiting viral entry or viral attachment, like miraviroc for HIV, oseltamivir for influenza, for example. Then we have antivirals that block viral genome replication, like acyclovir for herpes, or remdesivir for COVID-19. We have antivirals that prevent viral protein processing, like protease inhibitors for HIV or for hepatitis C. We have antivirals that stimulate our immune system, like interferons for hepatitis B and C. Now, many viruses mutate rapidly, leading to drug resistance, like HIV, influenza, etc. And unlike antibiotics, most antivirals are virus-specific and do not have broad-spectrum effects. If you remember, antibiotics have broad spectrum, and we also have narrow spectrum. Moving on to the third type, Antifungals. Target organism is, of course, fungi. Now, fungi are eukaryotic organisms, so it makes them harder to target without harming the human cells, because we also have eukaryotic cells. Now, antifungals exploit differences like ergosterol or ergosterol in fungal membranes. So, what would be the mechanism of action here? For example, disrupting the cell membrane integrity with drugs like fluconazole. We also have antifungals that inhibit cell wall synthesis. We have antifungals that block nucleic acid synthesis. Now, the clinical relevance here. So, fungal infections can be very superficial, like athlete's foot, or systemic, for example, invasive candidiasis. Candidiasis. I have no idea how to say that. Never learned it. Candidiasis. Let's go with that. And what is important is that immunocompromised patients, like those having HIV or cancer or transplant, etc., are actually at a higher risk for severe fungal infections. So keep that in mind. Finally, then, we have antiparasitics targeting parasites. Now, these are used against protozoa, like malaria, causative agents of Giardia, and also helminths, so worms like tapeworms, roundworms, etc. Parasites, essentially. Now, the mechanism of action here is inhibiting or disrupting metabolism and replication. For example, metronidazole for Giardia, chloroquine for malaria. Another mechanism of action of these antiparasitics is targeting neuromuscular function, like ivermectin, I think is the name, for helminths. And finally, nutrient uptake. So one mechanism of action of antiparasitics could be to affect nutrient uptake, like albendazole for intestinal worms. Yeah, albendazole, this one. Now, many parasitic infections are endemic in tropical regions and require actually long-term treatment. And the development of drug resistance in, for example, malaria, which is caused by Plasmodium falciparum, is a major global health concern. Now let's repeat ourselves. So antibiotics, we talked about two types. Broad spectrum, these target a wide range of bacteria, for example, amoxicillin. And then we have narrow spectrum, these target specific bacteria, for example, vancomycin. And we have different classes of antibiotics. This is just a few of them. We have an extensive course on antibiotics where we go into detail through all of these different classes. But here we mention beta-lactams, so penicillin, cephalosporins, for example, macrolides, erythromycin, azithromycin, tetracyclines like doxycycline, aminoglycosides like gentamicin. And these are used for bacterial infections like having pneumonia or urinary tract infections, etc. So antibiotics in general in medicine are used to fight bacterial infections. That's quite obvious now. Now, some target a wide range of bacteria, others are specialized for a certain type. Antivirals then. We had acyclovir, so this treats herpes infections. Oseltamivir, or Tamiflu, treats influenza. Remdesivir treats COVID-19. What is the mechanism? To prevent virus entry into cell, blocking virus replication, inhibiting virus release from infected cells. So the idea is that antiviral drugs are like, say you are on a road here and you're trying to go, these roadblocks ahead make you take turns or be delayed or not even be able to get through. That's kind of what antivirals do. They just block, sort of. They get the virus, it stops the virus from getting into the cell. or spreading somewhere else or making copies of themselves. Now, what about antifungal agents? So azoles like fluconazole and itraconazole. We have polyenes like amphotericin B, quiniocandins, caspofungin. You gotta love medicine. So the mechanism here is targeting fungal cell walls or membranes. And finally, antiparasitic agents. So we have antimalarials. It's used for malaria like chloroquine. We have antihelmintics like albendazole or ivermectin. We have antiprotozoals like metronidazole. And indeed, these disrupt parasite metabolism or reproduction. Now, it's all beautiful and lovely that we have treatments for so many things, but microorganisms develop the ability to resist effects of drugs. We call this antimicrobial resistance. And causes of these are, for example, overuse or misuse of antibiotics. Another one is incomplete treatment courses. Its use in agriculture. And the consequences of this is that it's harder to treat infections, and it increases healthcare costs and indeed mortality. Now, how do we combat antimicrobial resistance? Well, we use antibiotics only when necessary. We make sure that we complete a prescribed treatment when given. We develop new antimicrobial drugs, of course, and we promote infection prevention. Antibiotic stewardship, so coordinated efforts to ensure the appropriate use of antibiotics. Goals are to reduce misuse and overuse, preserve the effectiveness of existing antibiotics, and of course improve patient outcomes. Some challenges in developing new antimicrobials. Reasons for the slow development, its high cost and long timelines. Resistance develops faster than new drugs are created. This is a tricky one. Of course, limited financial incentives for pharmaceutical companies. So what would be some solutions then? Well, incentives for research and investment in alternate therapies. Now, looking forward then, some emerging strategies include phage therapy, so using viruses to kill bacteria. This is a very manipulative, but I like it. CRISPR technique, so gene editing to target resistant microbes, and of course new vaccines to prevent infections. Focus areas would be to using targeted therapies with fewer side effects. Alternative approaches like boosting the immune system. So in summary then, antimicrobial agents are vital for fighting infections, but misuse leads to resistance. New approaches and careful management are essential for long-term success. And of course, everyone plays a role in combating antimicrobial resistance. That's the end of this lecture. Continue now to chapter 11.